My ex got me pregnant and abandoned me. 17 years later, his grown daughter had other plans. Livia's world had become a fragile shell, painted in shades of silent hope and quiet despair. For 10 years, she had curated beauty as a botanical garden curator, while her own life felt barren. Her husband, Julian, once her passionate partner, now moved through their home like a ghost, his touch distant, his smiles reserved for business associates. The weight of their unsuccessful attempts to conceive hung between them, a wall he blamed her for building. She would watch him from across the room, his handsome face etched with a disappointment that felt like a physical blow. He was building an empire, he'd say, and he needed an heir. Livia felt less like a wife and more like a failed investment. The shell was cracking, and she was desperately trying to hold the pieces together, unaware that a single piece of news would shatter it completely. The doctor's words were a balm and a bomb. "You're pregnant." After a decade of negative tests and shattered hopes, it was a miracle, a tiny, flickering heartbeat on the monitor. Livia's hands trembled, tears of pure, unadulterated joy streaming down her face. She planned a special dinner, his favorite wine, candlelight, the tiny ultrasound photo placed beside his plate. This would mend everything. This would bring her Julian back. She floated through the day, her heart singing a secret song of life. The shell of her old life was about to break open, not into pieces, but into a new, vibrant world. She had no idea that Julian was planning his own announcement, one that would eclipse her joy with a darkness she had never known. He arrived home before the candles were lit. His expression was not the cold disappointment she was used to, but something worse, resolute finality. "Livia, we need to talk," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. He didn't let her speak. "I'm leaving. I can't spend my life with a woman who can't give me a child. It's over." He slid a thick envelope across the table, divorce papers. "I've met someone, Daphne, she's already expecting." The words were precise, surgical strikes. He had already moved his essentials out. Their joint account, she would discover later, was empty. He walked out the door without a backward glance, leaving Livia standing in the ruins of their life, the miraculous secret now a crushing, solitary burden. The silence after he left was absolute. Livia crumpled to the floor, the divorce papers scattered around her like fallen leaves. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, where a new life was blossoming. The juxtaposition was surreal, death and life, betrayal and creation. A fierce, primal strength surged through her grief. She would not tell him. He had forfeited all rights to this miracle with his cruelty. This child was hers alone. She made a vow, not with tears but with steel in her soul. She would rise from these ashes. She would build a life for herself and her child, a life filled with so much love that the shadow of his abandonment would never touch them. The grieving wife was gone. The mother lion was born. 17 years is a long time to build a new world. Livia used her severance and maxed out her credit cards to start a small landscape design firm from her tiny apartment's balcony. She worked days, nights, and weekends, her daughter, Kendra, often sleeping in a carrier on her back as Livia met with clients. The business, Verdant Life, grew as her daughter did, steadily, beautifully, and with deep roots. They moved from the apartment to a small house with a wild, wonderful garden Livia designed herself. Their home was filled with laughter, plants, and a bond that was unbreakable. Livia had kept her vow. She had created a world of beauty and strength, a world that had no place for the ghost of Julian. Meanwhile, Julian's life was a curated exhibit of success. He married Daphne, and their son Leo was presented to the world as the crown prince of his empire. Julian gave interviews to business magazines, the narrative always the same, the triumphant story of a man who built an empire and found his true family. He never mentioned Livia by name, but alluded to a sorrowful past and a childless chapter he had overcome. He was the visionary, the family man, the success. His social media was a gallery of vacations, graduations, and father-son moments. He had built a legacy, or so he thought, on a foundation of lies and a discarded wife, completely unaware of the true heir growing up in the city he claimed to own. A single phone call shattered Julian's perfect world. His son Leo, the center of his universe, was gone. A tragic car accident. The grief was a bottomless pit. Daphne, consumed by her own sorrow and a long-simmering resentment, turned on him. "You were never there for him, you were always working," she screamed. The divorce was swift and brutal. She took half of everything, leaving his business bleeding and his heart hollowed out. The public facade crumbled. The visionary was now a pitiable figure, a man who had lost his only heir and his family in one cruel stroke. The empire he built felt like a hollow, empty mansion. Desperation is a powerful motivator. Broke, alone, and haunted, Julian thought of Livia. He remembered her kindness, her gentleness, her unwavering support in the early days. She was his safe harbor. He tracked her down, expecting to find a woman aged by bitterness and struggle. Instead, he found verdant life, a thriving business, and a beautiful, elegant home. He saw her through the window, arranging flowers, her face peaceful. A plan formed in his desperate mind. He would return to her, the one who got away. He would play the grieving, repentant man. She would take him back. It was his only way out. Livia opened the door to a ghost. Julian stood on her porch, his expensive suit replaced by worn clothes, his eyes red-rimmed. "Livia," he breathed, his voice cracking with practiced emotion. I lost our son." He collapsed into a story of regret, of realizing she was his one true love, of Daphne's manipulation. He wept on her doorstep. The performance was Oscar-worthy. Livia's heart, despite everything, ached with a familiar empathy. She saw the broken man, not the villain. Hesitantly, she let him in. It was a decision that would set the stage for a war she didn't yet know she was fighting. Kendra came home from her university classes to find a stranger in her living room. Her mother introduced him as Julian, an old friend, but Kendra saw what her mother, in her compassion, did not. She saw the calculation in his eyes when he looked at their home, the way his grief seemed to switch on and off. She saw a predator, not a penitent. That night she confronted her mother. "He's the one, isn't he, the one who left you?" Livia, with a heavy heart, confirmed it. "He's manipulating you, Mom," Kendra said, her voice low and sure. "But let's not throw him out. Let's see how deep the rabbit hole goes." Kendra, a digital native with a sharp mind for research, became a silent sleuth, while Julian played the grateful guest, helping in the garden and sharing stories of his profound loss. Kendra was in her room, digging. She hacked into old business servers, scoured archived company reports, and followed digital money trails. She found the first thread: discrepancies in the financial records of Julian and Livia's old joint venture, funds mysteriously diverted just before he left. She also found his old, forgotten professional blog. In a post from 17 years ago, he had written about shedding dead weight to soar to new heights. The cruelty was documented. Julian, feeling secure, began his real work. He started talking to Livia about their future. He suggested they renew their vows, a beautiful symbol of a love that endured. He casually mentioned the financial struggles of his company, Verdant Life, and how, with her credit and the business as collateral, they could get a loan to save it and expand hers. "We'd be partners again, my love, stronger than ever." Livia, playing her part perfectly, nodded along, her eyes soft but her mind now alert, thanks to Kendra's warnings. The trap was being set and he was walking right into it. Kendra struck gold. She discovered a hidden offshore account in the Cayman Islands, opened in Daphne's brother's name but controlled by Julian. He had been siphoning money for years, even during his marriage to Daphne. This was his escape fund. More damningly, she found a series of deleted but recoverable emails between Julian and his lawyer from 17 years ago, discussing the most efficient way to divorce Livia without a financial settlement, citing her lack of contribution to his success. The evidence was no longer just emotional, it was criminal. Julian made his move. Over a homemade dinner, he presented Livia with a business proposal. A merger. He had drawn up preliminary papers for a loan, using her business and home as security to relaunch his company under a new joint name. "It's all for us, Liv, for our future." He slid the papers toward her. Livia's hand trembled as she picked them up, but it was a tremor of fury, not fear. She looked at Kendra, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "This is a big step, Julian," Livia said softly. "Let me have my lawyer look it over, for both our protection." He smiled, a triumphant, predatory smile. He thought he had won. Kendra and Livia planned their counterstrike. They would give Julian the grand, public reunion he craved. They agreed to a recommitment ceremony, a small, elegant gathering at a prestigious botanical garden venue Livia often worked with. They invited a few of Livia's closest friends and business associates, people who knew her story. Julian was elated, believing this was the final step in securing his future. He prepared a speech about redemption and second chances. He had no idea he was preparing for his own public execution. The day of the ceremony arrived. The garden was stunning, filled with white orchids and soft lighting. Julian stood at the front, beaming, looking every bit the redeemed patriarch. Livia looked beautiful and serene in a simple cream-colored dress. Kendra, the poised maid of honor, stood by her mother's side, a tablet discreetly in her hands. The air was thick with anticipation, but two very different emotions filled it: Julian's triumphant glee and the mother-daughter duo's cold, focused resolve. The guests were seated, unaware they were about to witness a reckoning. Julian took the microphone. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Thank you all for being here on this most blessed day," he began. He spoke of a long journey, of mistakes made, of a love that never died. He spoke of losing his son and finding his way back to his true north, to Livia. He painted a picture of tragic fate and beautiful destiny. He looked at Livia with what he hoped were soulful eyes. "You are my miracle, Livia, my second chance." The small crowd smiled, touched by the performance. It was the perfect setup. As Julian finished to a soft round of applause, Kendra stepped forward. "That was a beautiful speech, Julian," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "But before we celebrate, there's a story my mother and I would like to share, the real story." She nodded to a technician at the back. A large, portable screen flickered to life. Julian's smile froze. A wave of confusion rippled through the guests. Kendra held the remote. "You see, Julian here is a master storyteller, but we have the receipts." The screen displayed the evidence in brutal, chronological order. First, the financial records showing the embezzlement from his and Livia's first company. Gasps from the crowd. Then the recovered emails, his cold, calculating words about divorcing his barren wife for maximum profit. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Finally, the piece de resistance, the documents for the offshore account, the secret fortune he'd hidden while pretending to be bankrupt. Julian's face was a mask of sheer, undiluted terror. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Kendra turned to face him, her gaze unwavering. "You abandoned my mother because you said she was barren. You called her dead weight." She paused, letting the silence weigh heavy. "But she gave you a child, me." She clicked the remote one last time. Her own birth certificate filled the screen, her name and the field for father, Julian Michael Thorne. "I am the daughter you discarded, the heir you never wanted. We let you back in not for a second chance, but to give you a front row seat to your own ruin." Livia then stepped forward, taking the microphone. All softness was gone from her face, replaced by a majestic, cold fury. "You came back thinking I was still the woman you could use and discard. You saw my success and my home as your next acquisition, but you underestimated us. You created a daughter who is smarter, stronger, and fiercer than you could ever be. We are not your redemption, Julian. We are your reckoning. Now get out of our sight. Forever." The fallout was immediate and merciless. The guests looked at Julian with undisguised contempt. Murmurs of "monster" and "unbelievable" filled the air. His phone began to buzz incessantly. Business partners, the press. Kendra had live-streamed the entire revelation to a private channel for key investors. Julian stumbled back, his world vaporizing in a few short minutes. He was exposed, penniless, and utterly alone. He fled the garden, chased by the echoes of his own lies, his legacy in tatters. Back home, the silence was profound. There were no cheers, no celebrations. Livia and Kendra sat together in their living room, the adrenaline fadding, leaving behind a complex emptiness. They had won. They had destroyed him, but the victory was hollow. Stained by the ugliness of the battle and the final, painful severing of a tie that, however toxic, had once meant something, Livia mourned not for the man, but for the dream of the man she had once loved. It was a necessary end, but an end nonetheless. In the weeks that followed, Livia and Kendra channeled their energy forward. They used the notoriety from the scandal to launch a new initiative under Verdant Life, a non-profit arm dedicated to helping women rebuild after financial abuse and divorce. Their story, told on their own terms, became a source of strength for others. Kendra, with her sharp mind, took over the business's financial strategy, leading it to unprecedented growth. They had taken their pain and forged it into a purpose. Their legacy was no longer defined by his abandonment, but by their resilience. 1 year later, Livia stood in the flagship store of Verdant Life, now a thriving brand. She looked at her daughter, a confident, powerful young woman giving a TED talk about ethical business and personal integrity. The shadows of the past had receded. The man who had defined so much of their pain was a footnote in their story of triumph. Livia was no longer the betrayed wife or the vengeful ex. She was a founder, a mentor, a mother. She was finally and completely whole. They had not just survived, they had ascended, and the view from the top was theirs alone to enjoy.